Want to get creeped out? Welcome to Just a Little Stitious,
where things go bump in the night and sometimes it's just your fridge. Or it's us tripping over the furniture.
or it's something terrifying lurking in the dark.
Bad news, guys.
Yeah, for us. Okay, first of all, I'm Megan.
I'm Jess.
We're really annoyed right now because we just recorded almost all of this episode.
45 minutes.
We could have sworn that we started recording on our mics and we looked and it wasn't recording. Okay, so we're upset.
Yeah, so we have to start over.
Yeah.
And I said a bunch of funny, witty things.
Yeah.
And also perfectly timed things, as usual, as Megan has been saying this. And now that I've heard the story, you're going to be missing out on some of that. Sorry about that.
This is part 2 of the Union Screaming House. The first part was about Steven and his family who moved into the house. They only lived there for a few weeks because it was really, really haunted.
Go watch that episode, please.
Yeah.
Before this one. It's really good.
And this story is about how Steven now is going to help this woman, Helen, who is now living in the house. I do want to start this episode off with a trigger warning for harm to an animal, self-harm, abuse, sexual abuse, and miscarriage. There's a lot of disturbing events that happen in this story. In fact, I put chunks of this on TikTok, and there's so much of this I won't even be able to put on TikTok.
What do you mean?
There's so much of this story I won't be able to put on TikTok because it's too dark.
Yeah.
So Steven has been introduced to a woman who's living in the house because he had put out his story a few years after living there on paranormal forums. A woman named Sheila had read them and winds up introducing Steven to the woman who now lives in the house, and her name's Helen March. Helen's life hadn't been easy. She had left home when she was young, and her first husband wound up being abusive and an alcoholic, the same as her father had been. Helen wound up being a young mother to 3 girls. She worked as a prison guard and worked her way up until she was eventually promoted to a prison guard trainer.
Impressive.
Yeah, she was a tough lady, clearly.
Yeah.
However, she always had a soft spot for kids. So she jumped at the chance when an opening came up for a juvenile corrections center. Helen and her kids settled into a comfortable life, and she became the neighborhood mom. Even after her children were out on their own, she was a mother to anyone who needed it.
Very cute.
She then met Charlie, a truck driver, and he was divorced with 4 children. His children were also on their way into adulthood. They married and had a daughter together named Kelly. The couple felt like they had a second chance at life and happiness. One day, Helen had a nasty fall, and she wound up having multiple surgeries. She wound up having to quit her job because of these surgeries, and she became a stay-at-home mom. Helen, Charlie, and their daughter were living in a trailer when Helen's daughter, Patty, and her own 3 children had to move in with them. Patty had also left home when she was young, only to wind up with an abusive partner. Charlie's son, Jared, also was struggling with addiction, and he also moved in with them so that he could get help from his family. So there was Helen, Charlie, their youngest daughter, Kelly, Helen's daughter, Patty, and her 3 children, and Charlie's son, Jared, all living together in a small trailer. This is how they wound up renting the Union house. Helen had already read about Steven's experiences in the house when he finally called her, because the woman who introduced them had shown Helen his stories. Helen had been shocked at the similarities between what Steven and his family and her family had experienced, right down to the way that Mr. Winters, which was the landlord and the house owner, showed them the house and made her meet him at a restaurant to sign the papers, was jumpy while in the house, and didn't want to be there after dark. By the time that Steven talks to Helen, it's now only Helen, her husband, Charlie, their daughter, Kelly, and her grandson living in the house. Helen and Steven wind up talking on the phone for over 2 hours, and she begins to tell Steven about the experiences that she had in the house. She would hear someone breathing right next to her when she was alone. She would hear footsteps on the second floor when no one was there. She always felt like something was watching her from the upper windows of the house when they left. And whenever she got home, all of the lights would be on. One day she had taken her granddaughter upstairs to show her a kitten they had just brought home. It was dead with its neck and back broken.
Ugh. God, that's awful.
One night she was home alone and the kids were at her daughter's house for the night. Charlie was also working an overnight shift, so she was completely alone because now Charlie did shift work at a nursing home where he did maintenance. The police came to Helen's door and told her that they'd got a call from inside the house reporting a suicide. Helen was the only one home, and hadn't called the police.
That's terrifying.
Helen said something had also recently pushed her grandson down the steps. She had found him at the bottom of the steps, bloody and beat up. Helen told Steven that Mr. Winters, the landlord, thought she was crazy. It's also good to note that the reason that Helen and Charlie didn't move out of the house is because, number one, they couldn't afford to, and number two, not right away, but later on, Steven and Helen feel like it's their responsibility to make sure that no other families are going to move into that house and experience what they've experienced.
Yeah.
Steven and Helen decide that they're going to try and find out some history on the house. And this is what they find. The land had been part of a property of an Army officer, Captain John T. Cromwell. The Union House stood right where the Captain Cromwell's slave quarters had been located. Captain Cromwell had been a powerful man with powerful friends, and he had been a cruel man. They also learned that a tunnel system had ran somewhere on the Cromwell property to a location at the bottom of the hill, speculated to have been used to traffic slaves. This became fact, as one day a street crew accidentally dug into it.
It's crazy.
Some claimed that Captain Cromwell had made a deal with the devil or sold his soul to the devil. Soon after, Helen began to experience issues with her own family. Her grandson had moved out, and Kelly had begun skipping school and self-harming. She had begun hearing voices telling her to harm others, and she thought that if she harmed herself, maybe that would appease the voices.
That's very sad.
Helen was also worried that Kelly was using drugs.
I wonder why.
Yeah, I think because she's just acting strangely and different.
Yeah.
Steven finally asks Helen if she wants him to help her find someone to help with the haunted house, and she immediately says yes. They first find a psychic named Betty who would give tours at another haunted house. The psychic agrees to meet Helen and Steven at the house, and she emphasizes that Steven has to come because he has to face his fears. Helen's husband, Charlie, feels that Steven and Helen are messing with things that they shouldn't be messing with. It's also worth mentioning that a lot of the time throughout the story, Charlie is at work. He is not around for a lot of what happens, and when he is, I will mention it. The psychic Betty and her assistant Lee arrive at the Union House, and she immediately tells Helen and Steven from the front door that something there doesn't want her and Lee to enter the house. Betty was leading the way with Helen and Steven behind her. They were heading up the stairs to the bedroom that would have been Steven's boys' bedroom. Both Helen and Steven feel a cold burst of energy rush past them, and they both knew it was heading for Betty. Betty was then lifted 3 inches off the floor and thrown against the wall. So Betty tells Helen and Steven that maybe they should just go wait downstairs.
It's very kind of her.
Yeah. Betty and her assistant Lee investigate all of the rooms of the house, and then they tell Steven and Helen that there is a man upstairs who doesn't want anyone to live there. But more seriously, there is a vortex in the basement where spirits can freely come and go. She warns Helen that if she's going to continue to live in the house, she should avoid the basement as much as possible.
Yeah.
And this reminds us of the S.K. Pierce mansion that we talked about.
Yeah.
Same vortex situation.
Yeah, it's so neat. Portals everywhere.
Steven and Helen never see the psychic or her assistant again, though.
They're like, I am out.
Yeah, exactly. You're fucked. Sorry.
Goodbye. Good luck.
One day, Steven gets a call from Helen, and she asks him to listen to what Kelly just experienced the night before. Kelly speaks to Steven on the phone, and she's speaking really quickly, and clearly she's really upset. And Kelly is Helen's teenage daughter. Kelly had been sitting on the porch speaking to her friend on the phone when she heard something in the tree to her left. At first, she thought it was a black shadow moving through the tree, but then she began to hear a baby crying. She then saw a baby in a white dress hanging from its feet in the tree, and the baby was not alive. Kelly ran inside to get Helen, but when they came back outside, the baby was gone. Steven went to the house that night, and the 3 of them sat on the porch, waiting to see if they would witness the same thing. They sat there for what seemed like hours while watching a storm roll in the distance.
Nice.
It had begun to rain when a bolt of lightning lit up the sky, and that's when they saw it. A baby in a christening gown hanging upside down in the tree. They watched it for a while before heading inside, completely disturbed, and Helen began to cry.
It's heartbreaking.
About an hour and a half later, the storm had subsided. They were sitting in the family room with the window open when they began to hear a child humming outside and footsteps of someone playing in the rain. Steven pressed his face to the screen, trying to see the child, but he couldn't see anyone there. He decides to say, "Do you want to come play?" Which...
it's not a smart move.
No. And Steven, I like you. I liked your book.
They're just asking for trouble,
But
though.
why would you say that?
Yeah.
Okay. No.
Mm-mm.
There's no response, so he asks again, "Do you want to come play?" Silence. The humming and the footsteps stop too.
Risky little move.
Then Steven and Helen hear a low, guttural growl ripping through the window from outside.
Holy fuck.
Steven was shaking. He had never heard anything like it. And he decided to stay with Helen and Kelly for that night.
Jesus.
Each time Steven saw Helen from then on, she looked more and more tired.
Poor girl.
One day, she called Steven and asked him to come over because something was growling at her inside the house and kept getting closer. Steven hurried to the house and could smell a rotten, foul odor before even opening the front door.
Ugh.
Helen said the growling started very softly and then just kept getting louder and closer.
Yuck.
Before she even finished her sentence, Steven heard it, a loud animal-like growl coming from another room. Steven was terrified, but he decided to go look in that room. There was nothing there. As Steven turned around to return to Helen, the door to the basement opened behind him. Steven slammed it shut and locked it, and then they heard the growl again from a different room this time.
Ugh, fuck.
Steven went to that room and asked, "What do you want from us?" The growl came again and the basement door opened again. Steven went back and shut it and locked it for a second time. The growl came again so loud it shook the room and they could hear movement from upstairs. Helen then tells Steven that she has to show him something and she is visibly rattled. She rolls up her sleeve and reveals a large red and bruised bite mark. She didn't know how she got it, just that it had showed up in her sleep. I had something happen to me similar recently.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But we don't have time to talk about it in this episode. So
Next one.
Steven knew that they were running out of time and that he had to find help for Helen as soon as possible.
Yeah.
That being said, Steven and Helen did not have the easiest time finding help.
Well, yeah.
Very.
See why.
Yeah. Well, people are scared too.
Well, fuck yeah. I mean, in the last episode, we know that people wouldn't even cross in front of the house.
Exactly.
They had to go to the other side of the street.
Various different paranormal investigation groups would come to the house, all with different theories, explanations, and advice for Helen. None of the advice worked. Helen wound up with another bite mark on her arm, and Steven described that the twinkle that had once been in this lovely lady's eye was no longer there. And, you know, the backstory of Helen's life that I told at the beginning of the episode is really just to showcase that this was like a really nice, like grandmotherly
This is a good woman.
Yeah.
Very good woman. This house is doing her dirty. Yeah.
This is when Steven and Helen decide to gather people themselves and create their own group of investigators. They found a psychic named Alex and his sister Mary, who was a photographer, a man named Mark, who had a bunch of different surveillance equipment, and a sensitive named Carol. They were all dedicated to helping Helen. They called themselves MPR, Missouri Paranormal Research.
Sounds like a radio station.
They vowed that they would work on a case until they found their client closure, and their first client would be Helen. What?
It's an awful first client to have.
Yeah, it's a really serious one.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure.
From then on, a member of NPR stayed with Helen at all times.
It's dedication.
What was happening was really taking a toll on her, including her health. Her blood pressure could no longer be controlled. And whenever there was going to be a big paranormal event, her blood pressure would raise through the roof, but her pulse would lower to around 40, which is really low.
Makes me wonder if she's sensitive. Like her body just knows before
It's
like it's telling her. I bet she is sensitive.
Yeah.
I'd put money on it.
One night while Steven was staying with Helen, they began to hear noises from upstairs. Steven made his way to the top of the stairs when he found himself toe-to-toe with a large black mist hovering over his head. Again, reminds me of the S.K. Pierce mansion.
Yeah, gross.
Steven could feel its negativity, and he began to feel nauseous. But he decided to stand his ground and stand in its path. A few moments later, it began to swirl and then dissipated. Steven immediately passed out.
He gone. That'll do it.
He was really scared.
Well, yeah. It's like, you're going to stand up to me. You're going to faint now.
Yeah, exactly. NPR continued to help Helen and experienced many strange things while they did. Hot spots, cold spots, appliances turning on or off on their own, items disappearing from one room only to appear in another.
Which is also like the escape Pierce mansion.
And Mark, the surveillance guy who was described as a large guy, had a really weird experience. He was with a small group in the basement one night, and he had just checked the fruit cellar door to make sure it was shut tightly. And this was confirmed because it wouldn't budge. He turned to walk away and then heard the door scrape against the basement floor.
Ugh.
He turned around and witnessed a large black hooded figure with red glowing eyes.
Oh my God.
Entering the basement through the fruit cellar.
Yuck.
It was coming right at him. Mark began screaming and he was completely in shock. The people there had to take him upstairs.
That's freaking terrifying. I bet that there is a portal in the fruit cellar.
Totally.
It would make sense to me. I could definitely see that being the portal room.
Totally. And Steven said that things like this would happen on a daily basis. Stranger still, the paranormal activity began to take on religious connotations, which reminds me of the Bell Witch. We definitely need to do an episode on the Bell Witch.
Yes.
For instance, there was a strange phone call between Helen's mother and Helen's phone, where her mother heard Helen utter a prayer and then hang up.
That is so creepy.
That being said, Helen hadn't actually spoken with her mother. She actually wasn't even home when the phone call was made.
Yuck.
That is...
I don't like that. I wonder if she was like praying in English or like in Latin.
Well, I think they would have said if it was Latin.
Okay. It would be pretty cool.
That would be so creepy.
So creepy.
On another instance, Helen and Steven had been sitting upstairs when something very large moved past them and said Jesus in a low guttural voice.
Jesus.
Like that, maybe?
I don't know.
Jesus.
Ooh, probably like that.
Yeah.
They quickly went downstairs.
That's what I...
Yeah, exactly. All of these events continued to take a toll on Helen. She became more and more tired and her smile faded more and more. Steven felt like she was slipping away from them.
Ugh, they gotta just get her out of the house. But I get what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
Like, I get it.
On another night, Steven receives a call from Helen at 4 a.m. and she's crying. She tells him that she wants to kill her husband, Charlie. She said she had been lying in bed and noticed her dad's old walking cane leaning against the wall. She imagined smashing Charlie's head in with it and breaking his skull open. She even thought she could really do this and he wouldn't even have time to wake up. She also confides in Steven that the night before she had woken up to Kelly, their daughter, standing at the foot of their bed. Kelly hadn't looked like herself and had been staring at Helen and Charlie.
God, that's creepy.
She looked like she wanted to kill them. But Helen said she understands because she wants to kill Charlie too. I know a lot of women feel that way about their husbands.
There's a whole song about it.
Sometimes, but from all accounts, Charlie's actually a really nice guy.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know much about him, but...
Members of NPR continue to stay with Helen around the clock, which is taking a toll on all of them. On another night, Helen wakes up with 2 more bite marks on her arm. She tells Steven she's been sleeping with her door locked because she's afraid that Kelly wants to kill her and Charlie. Then she tells Steven about a dream that she's been having. She's alone in her room wearing a black dress, preparing for a funeral, but she's not sure if it's for Kelly or Charlie's funeral. Then she realizes it's a burial dress and it's for her own funeral. In the dream, she's never looked or felt better and she's happy she's dead. When she wakes up, she swears something has been in the room with her, watching her sleep, something evil. In fact, she knows something has been in the room with her because she can smell its wretched scent lingering in the air.
Ugh, gross.
Steven winds up contacting a man named Ken Sparks, who was a pretty well-known paranormal investigator and demonologist. Ken tells them that he believes there's a demon in the house and that Steven and Helen should find a priest to bless the house. They wind up finding a priest in his early 40s who agrees to come and bless the house. They notice, though, that the priest wasn't blessing the house in the way that Ken Sparks had explained that a priest would.
Right.
The priest seemed extremely nervous, and the entire blessing only took about 5 minutes. Steven and Helen actually had to remind him to go and bless the bedrooms and the basement, and there he had sprinkled a few drops of holy water before leaving.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
He didn't even make it to his car before the banging upstairs started.
I would have been out there so quick, grabbing him by the collar. Get your ass back in here.
Exactly. You didn't do your job,
Get
sir.
this done.
Yeah, exactly.
I would have been after him so quick.
Me too. Like,
the fuck you going?
I would have like ran in front of his car and been like, you could come back.
Turn around.
Now, by this point in the story, some of the NPR team had quit and a few new members had joined the team. So the new members were two different couples. Couple Bill and Trudy. Bill was good at capturing EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, and Trudy was a sensitive. Steven and her actually randomly ended up figuring out that they had been in the same 5th grade class. It was super random.
That's so funny.
Another couple, Marie and Evan, joined. Evan was a skeptic up until Marie brought him to the Union House. And his skepticism ended quite quickly.
That'll do it.
One of Marie's first experiences in the house was being pushed up the stairs by an unseen force.
Which I find quite funny because, it's typical to be pushed down the stairs because, they want to hurt you.
Yeah.
But the spirit's just like, faster.
Well, you could still get hurt being pushed up the stairs.
Not as bad.
If it's wooden,
you're not going to break a bone.
You could break your face.
You could break, yeah, sure. But like...
In June of 2005, Steven makes contact with a man named John Zaffis, a world-famous demonologist and paranormal investigator. And John Zaffis he'll talk to later in the story a little bit more. Now, this next part is quite heavy, and it is return of the demonic clown monster. Ugh. Steven hadn't really spoken to anyone about the clown monster that his son had seen because it's already so hard to tell people, like, your house is haunted because they're going to think you're crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But to add on top of it that one of the entities is a clown monster just feels...
too much. That's too much.
Yeah. So he didn't really share that very much.
Yeah.
But it revealing itself to Matthew, his youngest son, wasn't the last time it would reveal itself. Helen was watching her friend's 4-year-old daughter, which I wouldn't let Helen watch my 4-year-old daughter when her house is haunted.
No, and Helen should have known better.
She should have said
She should have been like, no, maybe I'll come to your house. But even that's a risky move.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Like, no, I can't be watching children right now.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
There's demons in my house, bro.
Yeah, exactly. So Helen was watching the girl, and the 4-year-old was sitting on Helen's lap when she began shaking and whimpering. She pointed straight forward and said, "Clown." Steven feels like there's something in the house, whether it's the demon or not, that reveals itself as someone's worst fear, or what they'll find the most scary. Marie, one of the new members of NPR, also had an intense phobia of clowns. One evening, while at the Union House, she happily shares with everyone that her and Evan's 19-year-old daughter is pregnant and they're super excited to be grandparents. But the night before Marie was going to go to a doctor's appointment with her daughter, she had a nightmare. It was nighttime, and she was standing in the side yard of the Union House with a bunch of people who were staring up at the house. Marie tried to see what they were looking at, but couldn't see anything. And then she heard a deep, low giggle from behind her. She turned around to see a demonic-looking clown with red eyes and razor-sharp teeth. It was holding a baby by its feet and laughing. It then slammed the baby on the ground over and over like a sack of potatoes. Marie screamed and tried to get the attention of the people there to help her get the baby from the clown, but no one moved. It was like they were in a trance. Marie just kept screaming, and eventually her husband, Evan, woke her up in real life.
That's terrible. That's terrible.
It gets worse. When Marie went to the doctors with her daughter that morning, they were not able to find the baby's heartbeat, and the baby was no longer
alive.
Yeah.
She had a miscarriage.
And our question here is, and their question was this a premonition that Marie had because she was a sensitive, or was whatever was in the house, did it make this happen to her daughter?
Yeah. My thought is that something in the house made it happen, and then they made it known to Marie in her dream that they were going to do that.
Yeah.
Or that they had done that.
I agree.
Point. It's terrible.
Steven receives another 4 a.m. phone call from Helen. She had woken up to the sound of her own voice speaking with no emotion and agreeing to something.
Yuck.
She was saying, "I can do that."
Oh.
When she realized it was her own voice she was hearing, she opened her eyes and saw a black hooded figure sitting on her bed next to her.
Oh, for fuck's sakes.
She realized she'd been having a conversation with it, but she didn't know what it was about.
Oh my God.
Charlie also wound up seeing the black hooded figure in their bedroom one night, and he finally believed wholeheartedly that the house being haunted could no longer be ignored.
Did he just think that like his wife and Steven were just crazy?
No, he didn't think that they were crazy, but he was more in the mindset like nothing really big had happened to him. And he was more in the mindset of like, I leave them alone, they leave me alone.
I see.
Yeah, so he was like, you guys are like making
Stirring
it more
it up.
active. Yeah.
Yeah.
From then on, Charlie began to listen to Steven and Helen a lot more about what was going on with the house.
Jesus.
Charlie woke Helen up that night that he saw the figure. And then later that night, Helen had an experience of her own. She woke up about an hour after the experience to a sound of deep growling. She could make out a wolf-like figure with yellow glowing eyes near the window. So this is like, I don't know, this is like crazy. Like there's things, like people see crazy things in this house.
Yeah, clearly.
From the other corner of the room, Helen saw a shadow figure and it shot across the room. She heard its movement as it did, and then she also heard it say in a low demonic voice,
I'm here.
Yuck.
Then the wolf and the figure disappeared. Helen got up to splash water on her face, and on her way to the bathroom, she saw Kelly standing on the stairs completely still.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
She asked Kelly what was wrong, and Kelly said everything was fine, and Helen sent her back to bed.
Jesus.
Steven felt helpless by this point, and he had no idea how to help Helen.
Do we know how old Kelly is?
Just that she's a teenager.
Okay. Creepy.
He came to the realization at this time that he needed to reconcile with God. So he felt that the evil that him and Helen were experiencing in the house had to be balanced by an equal amount of goodness existing.
Yep.
So he starts making that reconciliation with his previous religion.
That's good.
However, Steven's hope felt even more shattered when he received another call from Helen one day. This is really dark.
Oh.
And one of the trigger warnings was for this. Okay, guys?
Fuck.
Okay. So for sexual abuse, she had been raped by something invisible. She had woken up with a tremendous weight on her chest and felt like she couldn't breathe. She then came to realize that she was being raped by the hooded figure that had been visiting her room at night.
God.
What was most horrific for her is that the experience was terrifying and unpleasant, but she had been sexually aroused at the time.
So I don't know how much detail they go into about this, but I'm like, does she feel it?
Mm-hmm.
An invisible?
Well, it's not invisible. She sees the hooded figure on top of her. Like at first she sees nothing, and then she sees the hooded figure. Yeah.
That's crazy because like, obviously that's something that's like extremely, it's the most violating thing.
Yeah.
You can't report it.
Yeah.
You can't
do
will
anything
not get
about
justice for that. There's nothing you can do about that except for feel it and
be traumatized.
And be traumatized.
And also
and hope that people believe you.
Exactly. Because people don't even believe women when it's an actual person. So
yep.
Yeah. Later that day, Steven is at Helen's when she tells him she thinks Charlie is having an affair. She tells Steven that she will kill Charlie when she finds out for sure.
Is he?
No. Damn it. Steven didn't think she meant it, but at the time, this was the first time he sees what he describes as a nasty glint in her eye.
Well, same.
Yeah, but like she
meant it.
Like she means it. And not only that, but like she thinks that Charlie's having an affair. Why?
Yeah, like just like out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Interesting. Oh yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Later that night at around 4 a.m., it's just Steven and Helen left in the house because other paranormal investigators had been there.
Mm-hmm.
They were sitting in the living room talking when the room was lit up by a bright flash of blue. They went to the front porch to see what it was, and they saw a huge black wolf standing in the middle of the street. So this is super crazy.
That's cool.
And I want to say that this story is really just Steven's firsthand account. There's not a lot of corroboration, and that's why I went on such a deep dive on the house after this story, because I was like, this story is so crazy and some of it feels so far-fetched that I like had to know more. Yeah. But anyway, so they see this wolf. Cool. Helen tells Steven that that's the animal she's been seeing in her room at night. Because remember that one night there was the hooded figure and the wolf in her room?
Right.
Steven decides to run at it, and it starts running away. He starts running after it into an alley across the street.
No.
The wolf then turns on Steven, which causes him to stumble and fall to the ground.
Yep.
It then growls at him before running away.
I wonder if that's the growling they hear in the house.
Yeah, that's what I
The
think.
wolf.
Yeah. Stephen then tells Helen that if that's what she's been seeing in her room, she needs to get the fuck out of that house because that's a devil dog from hell that's going to take her soul.
Hellhound.
Well, like, he doesn't know that, but he's like, that's fucking terrifying, Helen. It's time to get out.
That's a hellhound.
That begins Helen's last week in the house. So,
wow.
Stephen wakes up at 6 a.m. one day to Helen calling him again. She wakes up at 3 a.m. every night to her having a conversation with a hooded figure who is sitting next to her in bed. She never knows what they're talking about, and a lot of times she winds up seeing the wolf in the room as well.
Oh, God.
She feels at this point like she needs to protect Charlie and herself from Kelly because she's really sure that Kelly wants to kill them. And she also says she feels like if she doesn't kill them first, they'll kill her.
Jesus.
So she's starting to really...
She's starting
to lose it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're probably making her think these things, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
She's getting these feelings in her head because they're putting them in her head. Although Kelly, I'm sure she sounds a little fucking cuckoo right now.
Well, and yeah, so could be happening to Kelly too.
So she's for sure, yeah. So she's like, I have to kill them. It's them or me.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So Helen's tone then changes and she begins to speak about Charlie having an affair again. She speaks in a way that's hard for Stephen to even comprehend as he's hardly ever heard her curse before and just sees her as the sweet grandmother.
Right.
I am going to read what she said. And it's very...
disturbing?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very vulgar.
Oh, okay. Ready.
I'm telling you, that motherfucking prick is fucking around on me. Oh yeah, he's fucking that big ass blonde he works with. I know her. I've seen him with her. She sometimes brings his ass home and I know he's been fucking her. I can smell her see you next Tuesday on him and it fucking stinks. Stephen and Helen speak for a long time before she eventually tells him that there's something she has to do and she'll call him later.
Oh no.
Later, she calls him back and tells him she tried to kill Charlie.
I knew it. I knew it.
She shares some really odd details of how the events unfolded.
Holy fuck.
She was going to meet him at his work for lunch and was looking for a gun to use, but she couldn't find the clip. Kelly's friends were over and they were also all acting strangely. Helen went into the kitchen to look for something to kill Charlie with, and Kelly's friends began to help her.
Oh my God.
She grabbed a butcher knife from the kitchen so she can, again quoting, and it's very vulgar, cut his throat like the fucking pig he is. Then I would stab him in the stomach and I would cut off his dick and shove it in his mouth and watch him choke on it while he bled to death. Then one of Kelly's friends suggests a serrated knife instead, saying it will work better. And Helen notes how strange it is that the kids were helping her and not trying to stop her. She picks up Charlie and confronts him about cheating, which he promises he's not. She keeps pressing him and he keeps promising that he's not. She finally pulls the knife on him and repeatedly tries to stab him.
Ugh, fuck.
He winds up fleeing from the vehicle and Helen tries to hit him with his car, but he gets away. The entire time she's telling Stephen about this, she's swearing and not speaking like herself.
Jesus Christ.
Stephen then tells Helen to pack a bag. He's going to pick her up the next day and it's time for her to get out of the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
That night, Charlie did not come home, obviously, and Helen doesn't know what she did for that night. She woke up the next day with bruises around her neck and bite marks on her back.
Oh,
yeah. Helen called Stephen that morning, adamant that whatever was in the house was trying to kill her. So Stephen races to the Union house. Kelly and her friends are standing outside the house, snarling at him when he goes inside to get Helen.
What the fuck?
The upstairs banging starts immediately the second he tries to get Helen out of the house. Kelly is then standing in their way, telling Helen to give her some fucking money. They get past her and Stephen brings Helen to the hospital. Her blood pressure is 209/198 with a pulse at 40 and dropping.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And the nurses and doctor are like, you saved her life. She could have died.
Wow.
After Helen admitted to hospital staff that she had been having thoughts of hurting herself and others, they admitted her to the behavioral health unit.
Yeah.
This is really weird. And I don't know if this is like something that Helen imagined or if this really happened. That night, Helen wakes up at 3 a.m., which is usual for her. She starts to make her way from her bedroom to the day room when a man steps out in front of her in the hall and starts yelling, "This woman is of the devil," while holding a Bible.
Wow.
The medical staff run at him and take him away. Helen goes into the day room and ends up falling asleep in the day room. Later on, she wakes up to a different man sitting beside her, reading quotes from the Bible, some of which are pretty creepy. I'm going to read the ones that really stood out to me. Mark 5:15. And they come to Jesus and see him that was possessed with the devil and had the legion, sitting and clothed in his right mind, and they were afraid. And then the second one, Revelation 18:2. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Helen winds up telling her doctor her house is haunted, and he actually believes her. Like, for real. She's telling Steven this on the phone when her tone changes again, and she says to him, "Did you find a fucking priest yet?" She keeps going between these two different personalities.
That's so creepy.
This like nice, loving grandmother,
Yeah.
sweet Helen, and this cruel person.
Oh my God.
A woman from NPR goes to visit Helen one night, and Helen's daughter is there at the same time. I'm not sure which daughter. It doesn't sound like it was Kelly.
Okay. Well, I'd hope not. She's a potential killer.
Helen's mood and personality continues to shift while they're there, and Helen's daughter tells the lady from NPR that she doesn't know who that woman is, but it's not her mother.
Oh my God.
Mm-hmm. They wind up taking Helen to see a priest named Father Paul.
She needs a fucking exorcism. She needs Father Theo.
Yeah.
Father Steiger.
Yeah, well, they've been passed away for a long time by this point. So they wind up taking Helen to see a priest named Father Paul, and he's a priest who is also a sensitive.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Never heard of that before.
And also around this time, Helen is released to go live at one of her daughter's houses. Not Kelly, her other daughter, because she has 3 daughters.
Right.
Kelly and Charlie wind up leaving the house too. And Kelly goes to spiritual counseling, and she returns to her normal self pretty quickly. But Charlie and Kelly aren't automatically, like, they leave the house, but they're not staying where Helen is staying.
I wouldn't want to.
Yeah.
Personally.
Father Paul feels that all of the things that happened on the land opened the door to the demonic because such dark things happened on the land, like to the slaves, that evil man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And states that when you get one demon, you get many. Halloween is now coming up, and
oh, get the fuck out of there.
the NPR group and some of the other people who have been around to investigate decide to go on a walk on a road called Zombie Road to celebrate the upcoming holiday.
Huh.
To Steven's surprise, Helen wants to come.
Oh, fuck.
But once again, at the end of their hike, her personality shifts. Steven approaches her to help her to the car, and she snaps and says, "What the fuck do you want?" Steven drives her home to her daughter's house, and she continues to snap at him throughout the drive there. Her daughter's dogs run up to the vehicle as they pull up into the driveway, but immediately whimper and run away when they see Helen.
Actually, she's a freaking devil right now.
Seems like she's possessed.
I think she goes in and out of possession. In and out.
They parked, and Helen looked at Steven with like pitch black eyes. Her pupils were dilated. And she says, "You fucking hate me, don't you? You think Helen has
Yes.
lost her fucking mind."
I was like, yes, bitch. I fucking hate you right now.
But he knows that he's not speaking to Helen.
No.
He then begins to see black shadows rising up from the ground and moving towards the car. Steven begins to drive away, and Helen freaks out, asking him what the fuck he's doing, and she gets out of the car.
Oh, I would leave her.
He
I'd
does.
be so gone.
He does.
Good.
She begins yelling and taunting Steven, repeating, "You got it fucking coming to you." And he drove away as she screamed at him, leaving her standing amongst the shadows.
Her people.
Halloween 2005. Steven got his kids off to school and fell asleep on the couch that morning. At 8:30 in the morning, he wakes up to a loud knocking on the door. He looks through the window and sees that it's Helen standing at his door. And she's holding something behind her back, but he can't see what.
Fucking serrated knife.
Well, she's yelling, "Steven, let me fucking in. Steven, I mean it, let me the fuck in. Steven, you son of a bitch, let me in." Steven made his way to the door, and then something made him look down at his feet. Both of his cats were there, trying to block his way and arching their backs and hissing at the door. Something went through his mind then about paying attention to animal behavior, and he decided not to open the door.
Holy my 100%. I would have shot her through the door.
Well, we don't even know if he has a gun. I mean, it is the States, but
He should.
anyways, once Helen leaves, Steven calls her daughter to tell her what's going on, like the daughter that she'd been
oldest.
staying with.
Yeah. Or whoever.
Yeah. She tells Steven to hang on. She's going to call Helen and then call him right back. When she calls Steven back, she tells him to absolutely not open the door for Helen because she has a gun and was planning to kill him.
Fuck.
She does ask Steven, though, to try to call Helen and talk to her until she can get to her mother. Steven calls Helen and she's sitting outside of the Union house in her car. She's cruel to him, swearing at him, and tells him that she's going to hang herself in the basement of the house. Steven knows again that this isn't Helen talking, especially since her biggest fear was choking to death, something that she had shared with him earlier.
Interesting.
He's able to keep her on the phone until her daughter gets there. So her daughter gets there and her personality seems to shift back to Helen for a moment. And Steven asks Helen how long she's been experiencing blackouts for. And she says, after a moment of silence, since Christmas. And this is October. Well, this is Halloween. Helen's daughter is at her car window when Steven asks Helen to look at the pain on her daughter's face.
Oh.
Helen then starts crying and breaking down and agrees that she needs help. And so she lets her daughter take her back to the hospital. Helen winds up going to many hours of therapy with a doctor and with Father Paul before she begins to return to normal. She's also heavily medicated for the first 2 years of her recovery, so she doesn't actually get an exorcism. She goes through spiritual counseling and therapy.
All right, well, whatever works.
Steven begins attending church again. He leaves the NPR group for some time, but is eventually convinced by Father Paul and John Zaffis, the demonologist that he spoke to earlier, to return to it and help others. John Zaffis also thinks that Helen did not experience a full possession, but rather experienced an extreme oppression, as a full possession would require an exorcism. In December 2005, Steven saw that the exact same ad for the Union House was posted in the newspaper. Not long after, he receives an email from Mr. Winters, the homeowner. I'm going to read the email. The new children are having fun running around upstairs and screaming, as children do when they're having fun. But I bet the parents will stop that soon when they finish moving in and get unpacked. When the kids first got there, they immediately ran up the stairs as little tykes do. They began running in and out of the rooms, screaming and laughing with joy. It was so nice to hear little angels screaming. I hope their guardian angels will watch over them. Little angels screaming. This line told Steven everything he needed to know. Mr. Winters, he believes, not only knew that the house was haunted, but was also feeding it families.
Yeah, literally.
So, like I said, there is very little corroboration on the story. Finding evidence online that, like in the book, there's EVPs, there's photos that have been taken. I can't find any of the photos online. Like, I think I found like one photo. So I don't know. I found that strange. So for that reason, that's why I decided to do some digging and some online sleuthing. The address of the house was never shared, but I found the house. I found the address. And I believe that I also found the real name of the owner of the house, which is actually a woman. And I had heard when looking through things that people were saying that the owner was actually a woman and not a man.
Right.
But Steven had changed that to protect the identity. Obviously, for legal reasons, I cannot share the address or the name that I found. I believe, but I can't say for sure because the woman's name is also quite a common name. But from what I found, it looks like she's had some lawsuits with other houses that she owns and rents out. It also seems that she may have been charged with animal abuse for 19 animals that had to be rescued from an abandoned house where she'd been keeping them.
It's disgusting.
There were 15 dogs and 4 cats. Several of the dogs had to be euthanized due to their condition. And lastly, again, I cannot confirm if this is true, but it seems like this woman passed away within the last couple of weeks of us recording this.
Yeah, it's such a weird coincidence.
Yeah. When I found the address of this house,
I
found a bunch of people commenting. People who have lived there, people who live on the street. And number one, I found a lot of comments of people who are like, oh, I lived here for a bit. It's absolutely haunted. I found people who live on the street who are like, yeah, everybody knows this house is haunted. Of course, I also found a few comments, but less, of people who are like, oh, I lived here for 3 months. Nothing ever happened.
I feel like that also is like super depending on just like who you are as a person.
Yeah.
Whether you experience things or not.
And I did also find comments of like, I've lived here my whole life, never heard of this. I've lived here my whole life. That house isn't haunted. Like, I've definitely like found comments of both, but most of them were saying, yes, this house is haunted. Everyone knows this house is haunted, which I found so interesting.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, well, it's how I found the name of the lady, was through all these different comments because I read so many.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Wild. And like, I'll say this, I didn't find her name through one comment. I found her. Well, no, I found her first name in one comment and I found her last name in another comment because no one wanted to share her full name.
Understandable.
Yeah. So the other thing was for me, I was thinking, okay, if this person who owns the house wanted to like make some good money, why would they not like stop renting it out and being like, this is the haunted house that Steven talked about in his book?
Yes. You make it somewhere that you can pay to go spend the night, do an investigation, have a tour, so on and so forth. It's just bad business.
That raises the question of like, why? Why did this woman never reveal herself? Why did she never do this with the house?
Has also made a deal with the devil and she is
feeding the house, like you said.
The house. Maybe that's the thing. We'll leave you alone.
Yeah.
But you have to bring us fresh meat.
Exactly. This story is so crazy and so good. It's so hard for me to wrap my head around though.
Yeah.
I am a skeptic, so it is like difficult with me for this story because some of the things are so like crazy that it's like, really? But at the same time, like reading all these comments of like, oh yeah, this house is haunted. Everyone knows it's haunted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I lived here. It was horrible. Yeah. No one stays there for long. And then finding out what I think I found out about this woman.
Yeah.
Like she's not a good person.
No.
And I don't know.
She's got like weird motives. There's something going on there.
Right?
For sure. 100%.
I don't know. Yeah, it's a hard one. I don't know. But let us know what you guys think in the comments. Anyways, you guys, this has been 2 really long episodes that have been 3 for us because the second one deleted. So we're going to end this one. But I will say, if you like stories like this, you should like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when we post.
And if you have any stories like this, you should email us at justalittlestitiouspod@gmail.com and send them to us.
And you should check out our Patreon. And if you want to be a part of a paranormal research team, aka help us do research, because it's fun. I think
it's fun.
It's
fun. I like it.
The people who get it, and the people who don't. But if that would interest you, like check out our Patreon. Okay,
do it.
Yeah. Anyways,
bye.
Thank you for listening to Just a Little Stitious. If you like stories like this, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.
And before you go to bed tonight, make sure to check under your bed, just in case that sound you heard wasn't the fridge.